Good morning and welcome to our government spotlight this morning. It's the City of Columbus zoning laws update. I'm Don DePero, your president and CEO of the Columbus Chamber of Commerce, and today happens to be Support Your Local Chamber Day. So thanks to all of you this morning for supporting the Columbus Chamber of Commerce. Much appreciated. 40 years ago, I say grimly to some degree, I was the economic development and commercial real estate reporter for Business First of Buffalo. And whenever there were zoning law changes made, whether it was in the city or the suburbs or the county, it was always met with some concern. The local officials, of course, wanted to ease restrictions, make development more palpable and easier to access for the development community and its residents. And developers, oftentimes it wasn't enough for them. There's always a give and take, and there's always some happiness and maybe some unhappiness on both sides. We're going to hear this morning from some great speakers who are going to inform us on the new changes forthcoming for the City of Columbus zoning laws, and we greatly appreciate their participation this morning and helping us out. So I'd like to introduce to you representing our sponsor, which is Spectrum, Tamara Howard, Manager of Government Affairs for Charter Communications. Good morning, Tamara.
Good morning. Thank you, Don. As Don said, I'm Tamara Howard. I'm Manager of Government Affairs for Charter Communications. As a longtime partner and supporter of the Columbus Chamber, I am thrilled to be here to kick off this morning's program, City of Columbus Zoning Laws Update. The City of Columbus has entered a new phase of growth. The 2020 census confirms that the city's population now exceeds 900,000, having grown by 43% over the past 30 years. To adjust to this growth, Columbus must adopt zoning code changes that will make it easier to build in the city and encourage the type of growth that supports public transit and affordable housing. Columbus's current zoning code is the product of 70 years of ongoing piecemeal amendments. For better or for worse, the current zoning codes underpin much of the development we see today. Changing these codes is an essential task if we want Columbus to be more financially resilient. I'd like to take a minute to share more about my company. Charter Communications is a leading connectivity company and cable operator providing superior broadband, voice, video, and mobile services under the brand name Spectrum. We employ more than 7,900 employees and provide service to more than 1,900 communities right here in Ohio. I applaud the Columbus Chamber for bringing forth this important discussion topic and look forward to hearing from our guest speaker. I now have the pleasure of introducing Des Bryant, Vice President of Government Relations with the Columbus Chamber of Commerce. Des?
Thank you, Tamara, and thank you to everyone for joining us this morning. Governments enact and enforce zoning laws as a part of public health and safety precautions. For example, you wouldn't want a waste management facility right by your house or a noisy factory right next to a school or library. Some industries present hazards, and zoning laws distance those hazards from particular areas. As a business owner, it's important to know and understand these zoning laws in your area. These ordinances or regulations simply control how you can use land. It's also important to note there are varying degrees of consequences if you fail to comply with zoning laws. In fact, you may even risk being unable to operate. So today, we're going to learn more about zoning ordinances, the City of Columbus's zone in initiative, and why it's imperative for the business community to be engaged in the city zoning process. We'll have a question and answer portion of the presentation, so please place your questions in the chat box. To kick the program off, I would like to introduce the man of the hour, Tony Celebrezze, Deputy Director of the Building and Zoning Services Department with the City of Columbus. Again, thank you all for joining us today. Tony, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thanks, Don, Tamara, and Des. Thanks for that introduction. My name is Tony Celebrezze. I'm the Deputy Director of Building and Zoning Services Department. And I promise I'll get to slides here so you don't have to look at my face the whole time. but I wanted to, I thought about it as Des was making some of his comments. Let me give you literally a 30-second overview of what Building Zoning Services does. We've kind of got four parts that impact the folks that are here. Basically, we've got a building section that whenever you want to alter a building or build a building, they look at those plans. Think of it as building walls in. We have a site review process that looks at where that building sits on a parcel, how traffic moves around it, how pedestrians move around it, essentially the building walls out. And then overlaid on top of both of those is the zoning code that we're going to discuss today. We also, kind of in parentheses, we also have code enforcement, which some folks unfortunately get to know on occasion. And they report to me directly. So that's kind of Building Zoning Services in a nutshell at this point. But I want to, at this point, I'm going to start to share my screen and see if I can get this right here. So, all right, hopefully folks can see that. And, all right. Again, thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk today. This is a process that began a couple of years ago, that the city decided it needed to look at its zoning code, because we were seeing lots of variances, lots of things that weren't working. So before I dive into that, just for background, and hopefully Des is a screen that shows map and text, all just that screen that shows map and text showing up on everybody's screen. Okay, all right, great. So zoning itself is made up of two pieces. You've got the chapter in the city code that says what can go where and what kind of districts and what type of setback, what kind of parking it needs, parking lot trees, all these types of features that help regulate where and how we build buildings and we have businesses and houses cohabitate together. Some of the challenges in our city is that areas of our city were developed long before the current zoning code was in place, and so sometimes you've got conflict. But the idea behind the zoning is trying to minimize conflict with the different user groups. The second portion of it is the actual map of the city. We have a GIS map of the city, as you can see on the left side here, that shows what a parcel is allowed to be used for. And obviously the purple represents manufacturing uses, yellow is residential, and so is orange, and then the pink or the red are commercial parcels. So we've got a code that lays out, got 3-inch thick code that lays out what can be done on what parcels depending on how they are zoned. So in Columbus, and this is a map of Columbus from 1950, we were 40 square miles at that point. I mean, look, we're up Arlington and Obetz and Worthington. Now, so our first zoning code was adopted in 1923, and it was comprehensively updated in 1950. Those two codes were very much about exclusionary uses, and that's not what we are seeing today. People want more of a mix of the uses, and I'll go into that a little bit more. But because of that, the current code just does not support where we are telling the city we want to go when we're talking to people. So we've got 5 goals that came out of an early consultant's report that we looked at. They came up with 5 goals that we need to accomplish with this. We need to modernize the code. There's a lot of different uses and ways of doing things that are different now than they were in the 50s. One of the biggest pieces, in 1952, what was king? The automobile. So they built a zoning code that was, for lack of a better term, a suburban zoning code. Well, not all of Columbus is a suburb. We got lots of areas that do look like suburbs, but we have areas, in that old area that I showed you, the 40 square miles that were built before that concept. So we need to support the growth that prioritizes environmental and economic sustainability. Essentially looking at where are the transit corridors, where can we add more housing? And we've got some tremendous potential where at intersections of major roads that could be big job centers that we need to help unlock that potential. Thoughtful investment. Unfortunately, zoning has also been used directly and indirectly for redlining and other practices for segregation to keep certain demographics in certain areas of the city and keep them out of others. We've got to keep that in mind as we're going through this to make sure that whatever we change, however we change the code, it is not inadvertently going to disadvantage one group over the other. We've got a tremendous city right now. We've got a rising tide. We want to make sure all boats rise with it. So guiding of the design and development. I talked about earlier, the code itself is rather exclusionary, and you can do this here, you can do that there. Well, what we're seeing is people want more of variety of uses, but one of the things that they do want is they want some of the development to be guided better. They don't want something that doesn't look or that looks out of character in their neighborhood. I mean, folks that live up off of Bethel Road live in a neighborhood that's much different than my own where I live in the short north. And that's fine, but we need to have a code that reflects that and thinks about that. And then last but not least, we need to have a code that is fair, predictable, and accessible. So that's a nice phrase. I always like to say we need a zoning code that's written in English. So you and I can, when we read it, we can understand what we can do and what we can't do. If you ever read it, for those of my age, it's like reading old stereo instructions. It doesn't work. It's tough, and it makes you go cross-eyed. So we've got to look at how do we do this in a much better and fair fashion. So as we began this process, we have the city of Columbus 224 square miles, thousands of miles of roads throughout the city. And so as we began to look at that, and that's, I always say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so our first bite at the elephant, that is the city of Columbus, we decided to focus on 143 miles of corridors. That's where we have lots of potential. That's where the transit is, jobs. That's where people want the different mixed uses. And quite frankly, many areas of the city have community plans that want these areas to be the economic generator for their neighborhood and for the city. And so we started with these business corridors. The highlighted blue here in the city of Columbus, those are the corridors that we're looking at. So it's not entire corridors, because we've got a lot of places where on some of these corridors it's still residential, it's condos, and those are not areas that we want to look at impacting. So we did look at what CODA routes, where the link-us routes are, looked at the land use plans, and basically what are the main streets of our neighborhoods? How do we figure out how to unlock the potential in these areas? Now, having said that, as we go through this process, we're not going to, zoning can set the stage. We don't mandate certain type of development. We don't force people to do anything. We don't say, because we changed the zoning here, your use is illegal. It just becomes a non-conforming use that can continue on indefinitely without any problems. We have a whole chapter that deals with nonconformity. So now you will notice there's a bit of an open hole right in the middle of the map for the downtown area. Our downtown area does not technically have any zoning to it. Everything that's built and designed in the downtown area goes before the downtown commission. And again, they're more concerned with how does the building look, how does it function as far as people coming and going. There's no parking regulations downtown. There's no mandatory heights or minimum heights or maximum heights. So everything goes through that commission. That's great for a downtown core area. We can't do that for the whole city of Columbus. That would be a bureaucratic nightmare for you all and for us. So what we're going to do is we focus on this phase one priority, which is, again, leveraging the corridors to create more housing. These are the areas where people want to recreate and look at where we're going to promote an equitable city. Bottom line is these main streets, again, that's where we have the potential to move forward as a city at this point. In these large corridors, we need to figure out how we can create more housing. Right now, almost all these corridors are what's called C4. C4 zoning district does not allow residential on the first floor. It also doesn't allow office on the first floor. And we're seeing more and more interest in that in different ways. And, I mentioned earlier, the current zoning code is exclusionary. So it has maintained this idea that everything on the first floor has to be commercial, have a seamless commercial corridor with interaction going on. The challenge is, as we have seen the rise in mail order and Amazon delivery and UPS and all these other deliveries and people ordering things different ways, we have actually too much commercial space in the city. We have a lot of commercial space, and I'm talking first floor. Ignore the downtown stuff, although there's issues there too. But along these corridors, we have many first floor commercial spaces that are not being utilized to their best ability. And so that's what we've got to look at. And so the zoning code can be a tool to help support that additional housing. And with that additional housing will come, hopefully some leveling out of rents and price to build things and price to buy. So, we want to keep, there's a lot of areas where people are more interested in walkability and biking distances. There's other areas, take say Morse Road, southern Parsons, maybe not so much. So we need a code that breaks all this 143 miles up into different segments and applies a zoning code that makes sense for that portion. My area in Short North, high rises make sense. You go further up High Street to Clintonville, or further up to North Columbus area, high rises don't make sense. We're not going to change the code to allow 10-story buildings, up in those areas. But then you get into some of the far west side. There are areas out there that could handle, could have business nodes that could have 5 to 8 stories or 5 to 6 stories with a lot of commercial interaction going on. So we need to look at how do we do this in a common sense fashion, but allow property owners be able to do a different use by right. But when I say by right, that means the code says you can build this here without having to go get special variances. This picture is Parsons Avenue Coffee House. This is old world area. This is a 100-year-old parcel that has residential on the second floor and it puts coffee shop on the front. And if you look, there is nothing beyond the building on that parcel. They had no parking, so they had to go get a variance, and yet it's thriving because it serves a regional area, a small area around it, and there's parking on Heights or on Parsons there. So we're trying to look at how do we adjust these types of parking requirements, height requirements, to better suit what we're doing. I always like this. Got a lot of planners that I work with, and they like words, and so I try to cut them down. I apologize for this slide being so wordy, but it does talk about a lot of things that I've kind of covered already. But basically, right now we're doing a lot of site-by-site negotiations, and I believe I got a map in here. I'll show you in a minute. That is just crazy with all the variances and site-by-site negotiations. We need to make the code easier. Objective design standards, which allow all parts of the city to be able to take advantage of putting in more housing, more commercial, with affordability and supply. We're seeing true supply and demand in our city. The other piece of this is looking at our corridors to encourage the use of bicycling, mass transit, walkability, to align the parking requirements with what people truly need, to increase the density and mixed use. I mean, Linden in 1950 had just about the same numbers of structures as they do today, but their density was twice what it is today. And so, we need to bring back more density. If we want more commercial, you all are looking for customers. When businesses looking to expand or build or put something in there, you've got to have a customer base to support you. In many parts of our city, we don't have that customer base. Our density has gone so low that afford the nice one-off local shops that many people enjoy. So we need to figure out how to bring back that density without overcrowding, without destroying or impacting the characteristics of many of our neighborhoods. So we've got to figure out a code that's going to foster that development, and also come up with alternatives to driving, because driving is more expensive. Not everybody can afford to do it, and it takes up a lot of time, energy, resources that can be better spent on other portions of our city. We also need to foster good design, and I'm going to hit on this just a little bit here. But basically, we need to make it clear how areas can develop and how you can do and you can build and meet the code by right and reduce the number of barriers. We have right now, just talking about reducing barriers, I'm going to toot our own horn here at BVS for a second or two. We have a building plan for that building. If you remember, the building walls in. We can get you permits in less than a week on most non-complicated projects. Projects like these that you're seeing in here, multi-story like this, can sometimes be done in less than a week. You pay a premium for it, and it's done after hours because we're still regulated by the state because it's the Ohio Building Code that we adhere to. But we also have done an accelerated review process for site development. Many of you all have ever had to do site development, had to work with sewers and drains and traffic management. That can be months of back and forth with them. We've developed an accelerated review process to push that much faster. Hopefully, in the end, it'll cut down a lot of site development timelines, probably in half. So, our goal is giving you all, giving the customers of the city, clear, concise, predictable guidance on how you can develop. So, at this point, we don't have recommendations. We are still gathering lots of data. You're going to see here in a little bit, we've got 4 workshops coming up that I really encourage you all to attend. We've got one on the weekend, 2 during the day, and 2 in the evening hours throughout the city. And basically, it's not going to be a talking head like you're getting right now with me. It's going to be you sitting down, working with groups around the different maps and different corridors that are of interest to you, and pointing out things that maybe we should be taking into account, and how do we do things with this. We've got tremendous support from the city council and a lot of the neighborhoods. We've got an advisory group made up of not only some small business owners, area commissioners, some large developers, small developers, but close to a dozen and a half individuals on that's helping make sure we keep in the forefront of our mind. We've got to make this work. We've got to make sure we let everybody know and bring everybody along with it. We will be, by December, we probably will be, by January 1, we will have some draft language that we will be putting out to the public. Hopefully by March, we'll be able to get this passed, introduced to council and passed with some hearings. That's only for the 143 miles of corridor. At that point, we'll then start talking about neighborhood changes or options that we may want to make. But that, again, that's going to be into next year. The biggest part, and I think the biggest bang for our buck, is these corridors that we're talking about. So here's my last slide. I'm going to send, you'll get a postcard emailed to you from Kylie, I'm sorry, that will not only have the web address on it, our phone number. You've seen, I'm sure some of you all have seen James Lewis on here. He is our communications person for this effort. The other part of that postcard has a QR code on it, and it goes to a survey that I'd love for you to take. I'd love for you to circulate it to as many people as you can, so they can take that survey. The survey's goal is to, one, help give you some ideas of what we're thinking, but two, it helps us understand where people are with density and growth, and what type of interaction we'll have between the commercial along these commercial corridors. And then also it takes you to our website that has that map that had the blue lines on it. You can click on that map. You can drill down to see if your parcel where your business is one of the ones that's going to be, that we're going to try to rezone. It also allows us, if you think your parcel should be rezoned, to shoot us an email and tell us about that, and we'll have some discussions to see. We're not all knowing. We went through, I think on those blue lines, there's 11,000 parcels, and I think somewhere in the neighborhood of about 7,000 parcel owners that we've actually mailed postcards to about the survey and about the workshop. But again, I can't emphasize enough. Even if you print out some of the postcards and put them on your front counter at your business, that'd be fantastic. The more people we take it, the better off we are. So at this point, I'll stop sharing my screen. And I do really appreciate Don and everybody the opportunity to be here and be able to talk to folks.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you so much for your presentation. I truly appreciate that. This is a very, very important topic for the business community and the community as a whole, because of the growth that we're seeing. And as you alluded to earlier, the codes haven't been changed, from my understanding, for the past 70 years. However, our office receives quite a bit of calls related to tenant-landlord issues, businesses that are operating in businesses that they may not own. However, they're having issues with the landlord because of certain things that may not comply with the zoning codes that you all currently have. When it comes to liability, who is liable for the repairs or the fixes, or basically getting the building up to code if it's not up to standard or up to you all's standard? Who is liable for that? Is it the tenant, the business owner, or the landlord? And if the landlord does not comply, if it is in fact the landlord, what advice do you have for the business owner for processes they should go through, whether it's legal, whatever it may be, reaching out to you? What are the processes associated with rectifying whatever issue that they're having?
Definitely. Good question. So, the first part is always going to be whatever your contract is between the landlord and the tenant, to make sure if there's anything spelled out in there for responsibilities. That's going to be the first step to look at. The second step is to, ultimately it does come down to the landlord. The landlord is responsible for their parcel and their building, the maintenance and the upkeep according to the city code. Again, depending on what kind of contract you all have with the landlord, that also can supersede that to a degree. But if you've got a structure or a building that you think is not up to code, that there's issues with, I would call 311, and I would put in a request, and talk about in that request. You can do that online, you can do that by phone, and those folks are good at combing through what you typed in there, what the problem is, and getting it to the right city agency. Generally speaking, it's going to go to one of two. It's going to go to code enforcement that I mentioned before, or if it's something structurally with the building, it's going to go to another smaller group that we have here called the building compliance section. They're the ones that go out and look at structures that bricks are falling off a part of the roof, or the roof collapses, or cars drive into buildings. They're the ones that deal with the structure. Code enforcement deals more with egress, maintenance of safety, life safety features like put panic bars, smoke detectors, things like that. They'll come out and they'll do an inspection if they're given access to the property. We do not, neither group has the ability to force their way onto a parcel. We have to be given an invitation, and then we can go in, and in the process, we write a violation order. The owner gets it, the tenant also gets a copy of it so they know what's going on. And then we begin to work with that owner to try to rectify that situation. If they don't, and we come back and re-inspect and there's no progress made after a couple of re-inspections, then we have the ability to take an owner to environmental court and ask the judge to put some sort of a decision to force that owner to do what is right and what they should be doing to begin with.
Thank you for that. We do have a question in the chat box, and I don't know if you saw that, Tony, but I'll go ahead and read a portion of it. You mentioned not changing the code in certain areas. Will the city work within the guidelines of for this historic neighborhood? Will the German Village Commission still be included in any development? Will this new zoning overrule anything when it comes to historic neighborhoods?
So yes, we are. That was a big concern of ours when we first started standing up the different, figured out which corridors. Now, as far as German Village is concerned, there's a small area about a half-mile long on Livingston that is actually part of German Village that is part of this, part of the rezoning that we're going to do to these parcels. However, the rezoning does not supersede the requirement for people in these areas like German Village area, Italian Village, Victorian Village, to still have to go get a certificate of appropriateness before they even come to us to do anything. So if you wanted to build something or change something in one of these historic neighborhoods, you've got to go to that commission, get a certificate of appropriateness, then you bring that to us, and then we'll accept the building plans, site plans, rezoning applications, and then we'll move forward from there. So it's not going to overrule the requirement of these historic districts. Now, we also have area commissions out there, but they don't have the review authority that the historic districts do. Like I said, you got University Impact Area, Victorian Village, Italian Village, German Village, Brewery District. I know there's at least two more in there, but you get the idea.
Gotcha. In your opinion, when it comes to the decisions that are being made related to our new zoning codes, what are some, I'd say, decisions that should be avoided? What are basically, what mistakes should folks avoid to ensure that, when you are implementing these new codes, that things aren't repeated, historically speaking? Some of the things that may have been, wrong, or some of them maybe the communities that have been wronged in the past, so on and so forth. Can you think of anything that you all as decision makers, when it comes to the zoning, can avoid making to ensure that we don't make the same mistakes that we have made in the past?
Yeah, part of the key is trying to make sure that what we do decide to do, that it makes sense across the board. And quite frankly, overtly or covertly, a lot of the single-family zoning districts that we have that require certain large parcels and large lots were designed, or at least in hindsight, we know, prevented many of the minority communities from expanding into a lot of the more suburban areas of the city. And it's rather interesting. Michael Wilkos over at Michael Wilkos has got a phenomenal presentation. He is a demographics expert. He has shown where people are moving and how they move, and the stark reality of, especially African American community, being kept on the east side of town, and really almost no migration to the west side of town is pretty amazing when you see the demographics. Not to say there isn't some, but in perspective. So trying to make sure that that the code is easy to read, easy to understand. So the average person that may need to do a building permit or change their zoning can do it themselves. Because right now, if you're gonna change your zoning, you've got to go, our process is pretty straightforward, but you gotta, a lot of times you gotta end up paying a zoning attorney to figure it out, and then to walk it through the area commission and the development commission, then get it to council, and it's all these hurdles the whole way. And so we're trying to, right now with these business corridors, make things more by right, but make it more flexible with what can go in there and how it can go in there.
Gotcha. Now, and thank you for that, Tony. Over the past several months, and one of the individuals is actually on this call, and I really want to ask this question, and I don't know if it pertains specifically to building and code, but it is an issue in some of our respective neighborhoods. And not to place blame on anyone, but there are folks that own buildings in various neighborhoods, and they are not doing anything with those buildings. They are slightly dilapidated in some cases. They just aren't being used at all. However, the owners of these buildings are sitting on them because, from our perspective, they believe that over time, the valuation of those properties will increase because of the influx of population we're seeing, so on and so forth. Is there a way to incentivize these folks that own these buildings to place people in them, to make them look better, especially for the community that they're in? Or, is there some type of rule or regulatory, laws put in place to ensure that these folks just aren't leaving these buildings just empty and, again, not looking the best in these respective neighborhoods? Is there anything that the city can do, or is there anything that your office can do to, again, entice or incentivize these building owners to do something with these buildings, lease them out, whatever?
Definitely, that is a big challenge. We do have a lot of either vacant or well underutilized parcels. For vacant structures, they have to be, the city code requires vacant structures to be boarded up, and that's a code enforcement activity. A 311 complaint will get them out there looking at that. There is discussion in council right now about doing something with regards to a vacant structure registry. Basically having to register if you've got a vacant structure. Part of that is trying to encourage people to put it back into use. The other part of it is a safety piece for our fire department. When they go out, if the structure is vacant, they don't know it's vacant when they show up for a fire, so they're going to have to go into some place. They have started placarding a lot of the vacant buildings, so they don't send somebody in to see if people are in there. But there's still a lot of places that don't have placards and we don't know that they're vacant. And so it's a safety piece for our firefighters responding to calls that they know they don't have to go in because the structure should be empty. From the zoning perspective and the zoning code perspective, there are different things that we can do to encourage more affordable housing, getting buildings back into production. And that can be, there's a whole gamut of it, including allowing an extra story, allowing different parking requirements for it. So we're going to be looking at different things along those lines, try to encourage this. And one of the things I didn't mention, in that 143 miles of corridor, and remember, we're the 14th largest city in the country. 80% of those corridors, the height limit is 35 feet. That's the same height as my single family home. And these are our major commercial corridors. Doesn't make sense. At one time in 1952, the heights along these corridors were close to 60 feet, 55 to 60 feet. So somewhere in there, we decided to lower it down to spread out more, which is not what we can do now. It doesn't make sense for us to continue to spread out. We've got to go up. We have the ability to go up and the capacity to go up. So, and it makes for a better neighborhood, quite frankly. At least I think so. Hopefully that gives you some answers for that.
Certainly. Now, could you walk us through the process if a violation is found? You and I have had, conversations in the past about, some business owners may not be in compliance because they just didn't know. They didn't know that they couldn't build, a ramp or an extra room or extra closet or whatever it may be. They didn't know that they had to get, a permit to do those things. Could you walk us through the process related to, finding a violation, and then how does your office work with, these business owners to ensure that maybe they can, become compliant without demolishing whatever it is or whatever structure they've built?
Great question. I appreciate you bringing that one up. Our philosophy here, the director's philosophy to everybody, is how do we get people to a yes? And by that, I mean, how do we help them get through the process? How do we advocate for them? And occasionally people do get, they do something that isn't, they were supposed to get a permit or they're supposed to get a review on it. And what, I mentioned the building compliance group earlier. Those folks work with business owners and parcel owners that might have got caught working without permits. And their whole philosophy is not about fining and penalizing them. It's how do we get them to get some drawings in here so we can review it just to make sure it's safe. And generally speaking, that's what we're trying to do. The Ohio Building Code is prefaced on, or foundation is how to make a building safe. And so, so you've got somebody, somebody puts in a ramp that they weren't supposed to, say it's on High Street. Most buildings on High Street and a lot of the areas have 0 setbacks. So anything on that sidewalk is technically you're operating in the Department of Public Services in the right of way. And so, we work with public service to help get you a license to utilize that portion of the sidewalk for the ramp. We, our building folks try to make sure that the ramp is constructed properly, things along those lines. A lot of, especially the older areas or when you're retrofitting buildings, things come up. Things that were done differently 20, 30, 50, 70 years ago. Our goal is to try to figure out how to make it safe. And our building official, Ahmed Ghosh, is one of the most creative guys I've run into that knows that state building code like the back of his hand and can come up with all kinds of things to different ways to make things work. And so that's what we want. We want to be a partner to get things done, to help you all get, if it's a violation, get out of the violation, get it complied. If you want to do something, how do we make it so you can do that with what you want to do? More information, and I know some people don't agree with this, but our philosophy is the more information you can give us as a customer, if you want to do something, the better we can come up with a solution for you to get you where you want to be. I've run into cases where people gave us just enough to start the process, they get the process done, they start building, they're like, oh, we want to do this one other thing. And that one other thing actually meant changing a bunch of the stuff that they already had approved. And we figure out that they knew they wanted to do it, they just didn't tell us. And I know it goes against some people's philosophy to tell government what they want to do. I get it. But in our case, we really, truly do want to help you get to where you want to be. And so the more information you can give us, the better off we'll be. And the better we can help you get to where you want to be.
Now, following up with that, as you and your office and your team is trying to remedy whatever issue a business has, is a fine imposed, or are you trying to ensure that you can get whatever fixed with that respective business without imposing a fine? Or when do the fines actually come in?
We don't. Both majority of the building and the zoning stuff don't have fines. We have fees, because essentially, if say you did work without a permit, you're employing one of our resources in our code or our building compliance group. So the fee covers their time and energy working with you to get everything, and them walking things through the process for you to help you out. When you go for, say, an after-hours review, our building plans examiners, they're actually working overtime to complete those in a short window frame. So you're going to pay for that premium service. But right now, most of our fines are based on, most of our fees, are based on the amount of service that you're going to get for us. So we know that certain building permits are going to take one, or maybe they'll take two inspections. We work all those costs together into one fee. If now you have the option, if say your contractor doesn't do it right, and you fail an inspection, you're gonna have to buy another inspection to pay for a guy or lady to come out and do that inspection. So we are very much fee-based. We also, our fees do not go into the general fund. They stay with building and zoning services. And so they are funding what we're doing here. They're funding our technology upgrades that we're very fond of because it helps us manage things a whole lot more. As a matter of fact, I see one of the questions about drawings. We have on our website, which is columbus.gov /, I believe, or /, .gov or .bzs, we have a red button that's the Citizens Portal. You can click on that and you can find any permits or drawings that have come through on a particular parcel or an address. And that has attachments all the way to actual full building plans, page by page, to site plans, you know, where's parking supposed to be, where's your dumpster supposed to be, all those types of things. We also got, you can also call in on our website, we've got a contact sheet. There's a number of different numbers you can call for the different things that you're looking for. So, you know, we have, I believe it was about 7 years ago, we started digitizing all the plans we had. We had a whole floor that was nothing but old building plans. We've digitized over 4 million pages, and now we'll continue to keep those in perpetuity. Prior to that, we could only go back 7 years. So now everything starting, like I said, about 8 years ago, is all online. Everything going forward will be online. You know, so.
Thank you for that. Now, you know, Tony, you had mentioned area commissions, you know, and their involvement in the decision-making process. Could you touch a little bit more on that? And then also, could you talk about, you know, how would one join an area commission, or how would one be a part of those discussions, especially as a business owner? Where do they find out where these area commissions are located, and how can they join the discussion?
The area commissions were put in place a number of years ago to help city council understand the needs and the interests and the concerns in different areas of the city. And we've got 21 of them, and I think they cover roughly 80% of the city at this point. We also got some civic groups that act like area commissions that cover most of the other areas. When you come to us and we need to do a rezoning or say a variance, you can't provide enough parking, so you need to have a reduced parking amount, or you want to go higher than whatever you can in that zoning district. Those applications go to the area commission for a recommendation from them. They're not a veto body, they are a recommendation body. With rezonings, you would also go before the development commission, and they would do a recommendation also, and staff will do a recommendation also. And those three recommendations go over to council. Council makes the decisions on what's called council variances or rezonings. If you're talking about things like parking, setbacks, what we commonly refer to as design criteria or design standards, those go to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. They make final decisions on there. With BZA, you can always appeal that to the Common Pleas Court. With council, well, that's council. So you've got to work on that. If you don't like what they did, you got to figure out ways to convince them to change it. But, you know, area commissions, you know, we're working hard to make them more efficient and to get people on their schedules and get them. I've worked with them now for 8 years, working with them, telling them, just make a decision. If you like it, if you think the variance can be handled by the neighborhood, and again, they're supposed to be looking at the variance, not I don't like the developer, I don't like the use, or I don't like this, or I want this to be there. Those should not play into their thought process. It should be focused on can the neighborhood handle the extra 10 cars parking on the street instead of in a parking lot? You know, is it going to impact neighbors too harshly if you add another floor to your building? And so, you know, you get on the area commission's agenda, you go there, you make your presentation, and ask them to do a vote, whether it's a yes or no vote. You know, we're all adults here, put on our big people pants every morning, and, you know, we take that recommendation, we go to Development Commission, we go to council, and go from there. Now, your second part of your question about how you join it, I would visit some of the area commission meetings, and you can find them on, there's a page on the website dedicated to them under the Department of Neighborhoods. And if you just type in area commission, it'll pop up, and you can look at the map and see which ones you have. Some area commissions have a business advisory group that they also work with, maybe a half dozen of those. But to be on there is they usually do some sort of election in October, and then you have you've got a chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, and a zoning chair. And so others have others, but they've got a zoning chair who manages all of these zoning applications that come into them for variances. Definitely encourage folks to become part of that. It is probably the most local politics you're ever going to get.
Well, speaking of that, Tony, and I have a couple of questions, but I wanted to get your perspectives and insights on NIMBYism. And is it something that you're experiencing within your office, or just generally speaking, what is your thoughts on folks not wanting, you know, change in their respective neighborhoods, but they understand the change needs to happen? Can you talk about, you know, some of the discussions that you're having at the city, and some of the engagements that you're having with some of these folks around the region, and particularly in the city of Columbus?
Definitely. You know, one of the example I use a lot of times to folks that are concerned about this is, you know, we need more housing. There's no doubt about it. We've got roughly 88 new bodies living in Central Ohio every night. The bulk of them are living in Columbus because we're just the biggest landholder here. You know, you may be getting intel up in Licking County or up in New Albany area, but a huge chunk of those people are going to end up living in the city of Columbus. So we need more housing units, whether it's apartments, condos, single-family homes, row houses, we need it all, you know, for good variety. And that leads me to the next part is, you know, when you have all one type of housing unit, say single-family home, you've got people that want to live in that area, or kids that want to move back to their neighborhood they grew up in. They've got no choice but to try to look at a single-family home that might cost between $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, when that may not be what they can afford. But a lot of them could afford a condo for $250,000 or even $300,000, or they might want to rent an apartment for $1,200. And so the biggest challenge is getting people to see that having some apartment or multi-unit residential in neighborhoods or near neighborhoods at, say, intersections and so forth actually benefits them, because it doesn't drive up the cost of housing in that area. And it actually helps relieve some of that pressure on that housing. If you've got a 4-unit, if you've got a small apartment building that's got 6 units in it, that's at the intersection of you know, a couple of busier streets. So, you know, we're trying to walk people to that. And Erin Prosser's got a nice, she's the up in development, Department of Development with housing, and she's got a great presentation on the housing crisis, essentially, that we have in the city of Columbus. And she's got a great piece that walks you to that shows you, you know, based on, you know, real life studies of neighborhoods, that you can get $100,000 jumps in neighborhoods that are all single family. Now, it's great for the individual that might be selling, but if you don't have the buyers that can afford it, you can be stuck at some point. Whereas if there was some you know, relief in smaller units or doubles or apartment buildings, then that allows those people to live there and doesn't put as much pressure on the single family home. Again, you know, it doesn't make it's not common sense to go dump a giant apartment building in the middle of the single family neighborhood, but a double might fit, or at the intersection of a couple of streets that are rather you know, that are more heavily used, maybe in a small apartment building or a condo.
Thank you for that. Before I close this out, Tony, do you have any last remarks that you want to, you know, get out to the audience and let us know about, you know, things that we should be aware of and just be cognizant of?
one, get us feedback on that survey. If you can attend these workshops, that would be fantastic. You know, if you as far as you know, the other parts of BZS, you know, as tough as it might be, try to look at us. I mean, nobody likes to pay fees or permits. Nobody likes to pay any of those. I don't either. But try to look at us as a partner and help you through the process. Our staff is phenomenal at working with people to try to help them understand what they want to do. And you don't always have to pay for things. You know, an email question to the zoning line or the building line can help get you information. Or you can even come in and talk to folks at our front desk if you want to. So again, look for that email later today with that postcard. Take that survey, circulate it to anybody and everybody that you can. Renters, tenants, landowners, homeowners, everybody. And then, like I said, if you can come to one of the workshops, we'd love to see you. Thank you very much for all of your attention this morning. And Des and John or Don, appreciate everything.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tony. And in closing, thank you, Tony, for your knowledge and participation in this morning's Government Spotlight program. If you enjoyed today's program and would like to revisit the conversation at a later date, be sure to keep an eye on your email. You should receive a link to the recorded program within the next 24 hours. On behalf of the Columbus Chamber, we would like to thank you for supporting the Government Spotlight series. We look forward to providing relevant and insightful programming for you in the future. Please be sure to visit the Chamber's website at columbus.org/events for more events like this one. We hope to see you all again soon. Thanks again and have a great rest of the day.